Deacon,
Aye.
Hensley,
Present.
Lester,
Here.
Mealy,
Here.
Schwartz, Spencer,
Here.
Spicer, Wiseman, Wright.
Here.
And the next item on the agenda is committee discussion of budget. Ms. Perry, I understand you have some comments or information to share regarding things you've spoken about in previous meetings you want to follow up on?
This is information that was discussed at the last budget meeting that I've provided to mayor and council and staff since then regarding the parks fund balance. I do apologize, this particular presentation, if you sync your packet, it will be out there for you to see, but we just got to it right before we walked in here. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the parks fund balance. At the last meeting, it was mentioned that the parks fund balance was $8.9 million. And while that is a true statement, I want to make sure to clarify a few items within that $8.9 million. That amount came from our audited financial statements at the end of fiscal year 22. And that number is a total fund balance. So you have to take some things out of there to obtain what is a remaining or a spendable portion. So you have to take out $34,000. That's for non-spendable fund balance. That's related to prepaids that Parks has. An additional almost $438,000 has to be backed out. That was the portion of the fund balance at the end of fiscal year 22 that was committed to projects, meaning they were on purchase orders. So those would back out of the available number. And then also of that 22 fund balance, there is a portion that was assigned for the FY23 usage for the current fiscal year that we're in of $3.1 million. So that leaves a fund balance available to parks of $5.3 million. And taking into account the fact that the current budget that is before this committee has almost $2.8 million of fund balance usage, that means that the remaining fund balance based on the budget that's before you would be $2.5 million. So while it is true that there's an $8.9 million fund balance, there are some other items that need to be taken into account. I do want to point out that if the parks budget were to be adopted as it stands now with the additional $2 million in use of fund balance for the capital projects, the fund balance of the 2.5 equates to approximately 22.84%, and the 10% fund balance amount that's required by the city's financial policies would be 1.1. So it is double what the requirement is. Also, if all things stayed the same and parks were to spend an additional $560,000 out of the parks fund to cover the FY24 capital improvement funding, which was also discussed at the last meeting, the parks fund balance would be at $1.9 million or 17.82%. So that's just some additional information we wanted to provide as we get started with discussions this evening.
Great, thank you very much. Any comments, questions? And you mentioned the parks fund balance projects.
So we do have the parking lot that we loaded the items into that were discussed at the last meeting that still need action. And we also have items that are on the parks parking lot that we added. So when the mayor's approved budget came before council, it did not have any funds in it for parks capital improvements to be done out of the parks fund. The recommendations from the Parks Commission had $2 million worth of fund balance usage. Those are the projects that are listed here in the designated amounts that were specified to me by Parks staff. So this item will also need action on it. Again, just utilizing the fund balance of parks, and council will need to take action on this since it was not included in the mayor's approved budget.
Just a procedural clarification for me on these types of votes. It's a majority of those voting and present during the meeting, not correct of the entire council. Okay. Councilman Neely, do you have your hand up? I don't. No. Okay. Any comments or questions? And I see Councilwoman Wiseman is on the line. How much questions?
So at this point, Mr. Chairman, we could proceed with any of the items that are on the parking lot if the committee was so inclined.
we'll open it up, broad conversation of the budget and proposed items on the parking lot among the committee members. Councilman Schwartz.
Yeah, I got a couple things here. So it sounds like there's ample money in the Parks Reserve Fund to use the $560,000 for some different uses in the park sales tax, or the capital improvement sales tax. So I want to go ahead and put that on the parking lot, and I want to accompany that, and I want it to be all one motion, if possible. 560. The ARF truck, I've spoke to the chief, and we think we can get a pretty good deal for an ARF truck for $600,000, so we can reduce that 450 down to 50. And then I know Councilman Spencer has been speaking with Mr. Marash about some equipment, and I know Councilwoman Wiseman talked about this last week. I'm gonna go ahead and add to the parking lot $420,000 for 2 tandem axle dump trucks, which can also be snow plows, if I'm correct.
Yeah.
So 2 replacements for that, as well as $90,000 for a 1-ton truck to replace one of our fleet vehicles.
Ms. Perry.
And I'm assuming that is all out of the capital improvement tax that we're talking about, the $560,000. Okay.
I think the ARF truck is an essential piece of equipment for this city. I think the state, for once in their lives, bucked up and gave us a little bit of money to help out with our public safety needs. I think it's a symbolic day that we're talking about buying fire equipment, and I would appreciate the support of the committee.
Councilman Schwartz has proposed these items, I believe, in the form of a motion.
Yes.
Okay, we have a motion. A second?
Second.
A second by Councilman Spencer. Councilman Neely.
Were the dump trucks listed as a line item in the proposed budget?
It was a pink sheet.
Pink sheet item.
It's page 215 on the long list of them.
Are all those, there's requirements to be, funding with the capital improvement sales tax, are all those eligible expenses?
Yes, they are.
And then the motion is to strip parks of their FY24 capital improvement tax fund that voters approved to make these purchases. Is that right?
No, that is not right.
So what was the funding source?
The capital improvements sales tax. Capital improvement sales tax. The commissioner loves to go to the newspaper and talk about tax ballot, including the breakdown of where the taxes will go, said the commissioner, which isn't true. So I don't know if you flat out lied about that or if you tried to mislead people. That's been up to the voters, and that's what they approved. The voters approved so the city of Jefferson can continue this current sales tax of 0.5% for the purpose of funding capital improvements by its imposition for the period of April 1st, 2022 to March 31st, 2027. Yes or no? Not a mention of the parks.
So it was part of the resolution that members of this body
Part of the
signed
resolution.
on to.
It was part of the resolution that 3 people of this body voted on.
Yeah, I mean, it was what was presented to voters.
Not by the city.
Let's not talk over each other, please.
The most recent continuation of the half-cent capital sales tax. And I think what better place to send capital improvement tax dollars than parks? I mean, the return on investment is tremendous. I don't understand why we need to rob from parks. I don't quite get it. You know, the return on investment in public safety, we constantly hear about our kids not having anything to do. Your value of your property in Jefferson City, I mean, when we invest in our parks, we invest in our people. I'm absolutely opposed to taking money from parks when they have obligated expenses here. It's just wild to me. I understand the city needs things. I'm not opposed to those needs, but I think we come up with a funding source other than stripping parks of money. I don't like that.
Any other comments by members of the committee? Councilman Lester.
Yes, I am opposed to damaging the trust of the voters by redesignating money from parks. The voters, and it was put on the resolution and advertised to the voters, 10% capital improvement going to parks, and that's was done, I believe, because parks has such a good record of doing well with the capital improvements and with the popular with the people, and I just think it's wrong to go against what was presented to the public as what these monies were intended for. I also guess I question why we're doing this at this time. We have a new city administrator coming on. We have a study that's being done to look at efficiency in the city's finances and the way it operates. I just don't think we should be doing these type of actions, especially when, like I said, I think it damages the trust of the voters in the city. What we put forward them to fund capital improvement. I mean, if we want to do something with capital improvement, we need to more build up the trust of the voters, because to me, we need to be working towards getting our capital improvement tax to 10 years at least, so we can do bonding, so we can really fund some of these big projects that we have. It's going the wrong way when we take this type of action, in my opinion.
Any other comments or questions by members of the committee? Councilman Schwartz.
Just so I'm hearing correctly, again, the voters did not vote on the parks. They quite simply did not vote on the parks. Now, if some organization, with a non-binding resolution passed by this body, and what I mean of this body is a completely different body as it sits today. If somebody took a non-binding resolution, put it on a piece of paper and handed it out to voters, that's not my fault. What I did when I ran is promised to bolster our public safety and to provide the means of infrastructure to this city. And that's exactly what this motion attempts to do. It replaces a 33-year-old fire truck. It replaces, I think, a 17 or 18-year-old 2 snowplows, and it replaces another truck. We just heard from the finance director that the parks will have 2.5, 4.8, 4.89, and 45 cents left on the bottom line that can certainly be used for the $560,000 we're taking away. And it would have been actually really nice to hear from the Parks Commissioner instead of him going to the newspaper to play his case out. And I never did. Never heard a word. I don't know if Councilman Deacon did, but I thought that was a really interesting play. So I stand by the motion.
Councilman Spencer.
Yeah. Again, I know I've said this numerous times because I was part of the initial discussions of the half-cent park sales tax to begin with. They were never, ever supposed to be part of capital improvement sales tax. That was supposed to be a self standalone, self-sustaining, sole funding source for parks. Somehow, after the firefighters' local union did all the work, went door to door, knocked on the doors, and said, please pass this, somehow it got changed. So if you want to talk about trust, there's a lot of trust that should be repaired, absolutely. But just like everybody else's budget, we have to make adjustments. We have to fund needs and priorities, not wants. And for a certain segment of our community, parks is still a want, not necessarily a need. They are valued. It's important to have. But having snowplow trucks being ready to use at a moment's notice to remove snow so public safety, police and fire can respond to medical emergencies, car accidents, structure fires, that's at a higher level for me than a park's capital improvement. So I appreciate Councilman Schwartz's energy and effort towards this, and I will be supporting that. Thank you.
Councilman Mealy.
Thanks. So I think there's some misunderstandings historically here. You know, when the CIP first started out, parks used to have 20%, and that was reduced to 10%. And then the idea is this capital improvement tax supplements the parks portion of the capital improvement tax, supplements the portion that they lost. So I don't see that, you know, they weren't ever supposed to have this money. It was absolutely directed to them, and then it was directed to them by the voters. I mean, when you have council members' names on a resolution from the previous council saying that we support this tax going to parks, this percentage of this tax going to parks, and you have it in the newspaper and you have it presented to the voters, I don't know how it's not presented to the voters. It's all over the place as to what's being done. You know, I know there's people that represent here that get up and leave town or don't do business here or buy all their stuff online or whatever, and that's fine. But I gotta tell you, this town's 40,000 people, and people love our parks. I was just at Ward 3 Park yesterday for an art fair where some of our family was drawing. And they're doing so many remarkable things, I mean, in our community. And it's just a 100% return on investment. I don't know how, you know, I mean, maybe some of my colleagues are there with me, but, you know, the park system is a complete return on investment. So I actually got I'm going to sidetrack here, but a question for you, Mr. Marash. Do you without, let me ask the question like this. So without these trucks for FY24, does the city receive less snow removal services?
We attempt to provide the best snow removal we can do. But our equipment, as I stated earlier in my presentation several weeks ago, our equipment is nearing, I mean, it's at the end of its useful life. And in fact, we're going to talk about these two dump trucks, these tandems, Thursday. We have it on as a Public Works and Planning item. This is time of year that the mechanics get a little extra time. They go through the equipment. Sorry if I speak louder with the things that kind of trailed off. Mechanics are going through the equipment, making sure they're prepared if they need to order anything for wintertime. And two of the tandems, what made them more important is we found some cracked frames in those two tandems. So we'll put those back together for winter in a manner, you know, we'll weld them back together, but that just means there's rust in their frames. And they'll probably break somewhere else, and we'll have to take them apart, weld them back again until we can get them replaced. But they do go down. They could go down easily in this age of equipment, including the thank you also for the F-150. That was number 2 on our list. 7 of those 1 tons, but those are snow plow trucks as well. So all of our equipment we try to use for snow plowing, and then in the summer we use it for construction. So you know, our equipment is at an age that it's very dicey to operate, and we'd have to cut a route and start, you know, doing it a different way if things go down.
Okay, so why do we see, like, I don't know if other cities are doing this, I guess I need to go look, but why do we see such a big expense for machinery in a paint sheet? Like, why are we not working within a city, you know, within a budget to do that. I mean, I guess I don't unexpended funds, basically. Why are we pinch hitting an item of that proportion?
Well, so I started working here just before all this equipment was bought. At that time, it was kind of in a similar condition that the equipment was in very poor shape. We were parking things left and right. And so we said, talked to our council at the time, and they said, okay, we're going to infuse a bunch of money. So they bought a lot of equipment back in this 04, 05, 06 timeframe. And so we've been living on that for over 15 years now. And that's kind of the useful life of it, but it's all bought at one time, or a majority of it. And so it's kind of come and do that we need to infuse money into that again. And I'm not weighing whether park sales tax or whatever. It's just there's a lot of equipment needs here. We've been putting in the budget for the last several years. This hadn't been an opportunity to fund it.
Yeah. Doesn't it sound so weird to everybody in the room to say, though, like, so we've got trucks and snow plows that have been in disrepair for a long time, and we've been trying to figure it out. And now we're just going to rob parks of money as a last-ditch effort? This sounds wild to me. I mean, in Ward 1, I know Parks has been one of the sole departments of the city investing in Ward 1, with Riverside and everything going on there. I mean, the tremendous sales tax revenues that's generated for the city. They're good stewards of their money. They're fiscally responsible, and I think the other entities may need to take note.
Councilman Spencer.
Well, I think your comparison is apples and oranges. When you have a half-cent dedicated sales tax for parks, and we have a half-cent capital improvement sales tax, that's being parsed and split between public works, between some computer and technical upgrades for City Hall, and for also public safety. So, three of the major departments of the city are, I'm not going to say competing or fighting, but they're trying to fund each individual department's needs. When you say there's 100% on investment. I'm not sure where you get that. And you said they're good stewards of their taxpayer dollars. When you spend over $20,000 for a park bench so you can charge a smartphone, to me that's extravagant. That's not being a good use and being a good steward of your taxpayer dollars. When you buy an e-bike, that no one in staff that I've asked even knows where it's at. So I think there is some room to improve in that area. For you, Ms. Marash, even on a perfect scenario, if this dollars were to be approved, how long would it take to get 2 tandem axle trucks in service?
Yeah, we've recently called them, and they're saying 18 months probably is the minimum. So getting the orders in now, we're going to have to limp these trucks along, or we may have to park them eventually. I'm not going to say they're going to make it the full time frame, or maybe closer to 2 years. They're saying 18 months minimum on the bigger trucks like that. So
again, that is a concern as well, and that's why we're trying to allocate these dollars as soon as we can so that you can get those. Thank you.
Any other comments by members of the committee?
If I may, excuse me. Since the parks tax came in, and they've had vast improvement in our parks. We have really done a lot, 100% different than it was before, and that's what they're asked to do under the past director. It was different. This gentleman, the committee asked him to do something, gave him a plan, and he's executed it. At this time, they have done so much. The capital improvements are a little bit of a luxury. A number of them really need to be done. The ones they have on there for this year come out of their capital really need to be done. They were things you could put on the back burner for a long time. And with somewhat of a surplus, I don't think it's critical that they have that money this year. I really don't want to set a precedent. What I would like to see is every year, the parks and the mayor, they get together to see what each entity needs. and how we can work together instead of just automatically giving 10% or 5%. If they need 10% next year, fine, but let's have some justification for that money that we're giving them. I'm happy with their spends. There's improvements different ways. But we really have to work together because this is the citizens' money. And you say the parks bring investment. Well, my gosh, if the road's broken down, you can't get to the park. So there's no reason to get there. And the e-bikes might get on the greenways they're taken care of. But we have to put that horse before this cart for time. And on that same note, I would love for the county to talk with us. We put almost 70% of the money in their road and bridge tax. They've got a bunch and they don't share it. That's our money, but they keep it. So I think for some reason we've got 3 different kingdoms and they wear different kind of hats and have different lightning swords with their budgets and they don't share. Well, all 3 of us ought to work together. It's our money and we all know each other. I hate this. Their money, our money. We should be doubling up on public works, and parks should say, yeah, we need your help on this, and then get along, we'll share that money. It's not like 2 different sources of revenue. It's the citizens of Jefferson City. And I caught all kinds of heat today, so well, I promised. We made a promise to fix that bridge down there on High Street. We made a promise to fix a bridge or Monroe Street. Well, sometimes you just have to say, look, I promised my kids stuff sometimes that I shouldn't have, that later I couldn't afford. We did that one time when I was little and we never did it again. You can't make promises to the people and you have to be able to change your mind. I don't know if any of you all had daughters. I had 6 daughters. I learned you had to change your mind. And on this one, the public just got to realize you have to change your mind sometimes.
Councilman Lester.
Yeah, I just want to talk about precedents. I think council newly elected, going back on what previous councils have approved is a bad precedent. Shouldn't happen. I don't know if it's happened that much in the past before this current council. And although you don't want it to be a precedent, it is a precedent. Could be an ongoing thing once you do this. The parks have been good stewards of the money and invested it very wisely in their public infrastructure. And I don't think something like this, which is kind of a punishment that they deserve.
I object to the punishment. What do you mean punishment?
Well,
For, I'll be quiet. Shut mouths shouldn't catch flies.
We don't recognize objections either. Councilman Lester, were you finished?
yes.
Any other comments? Well, Councilman Schwartz.
I can't for the life of me understand the logic of $2.5 million sitting on a bottom line doing nothing for our citizens. Absolutely nothing. And us taking $500,000 of that. Parks could still do whatever they want. We're not cutting them. And we can buy this essential equipment and no one's hurt. It's ridiculous. It's $2.5 million of unallocated, unspent fund balance doing nothing for the citizens of this city. And we have people objecting over taking a very small portion of that for 1 year in order to buy a fire truck, of all things, on 9/11. That's ridiculous.
I would like to know what Parks thinks of this.
Okay, we're gonna finish discussion on the committee, and then we'll move it. Councilman Mealy? Thank you.
So there's been discussion about just setting on $2.5 million. I mean, I don't know if anybody's watching, or that's the problem, is the public doesn't know what happens here, but $2.5 million is an unspent fund balance for parks. I mean, they rely on that money in reserves for things they don't expect. And so, Ms. Perry, what's the unspent fund balance for the city that's just sitting there?
I don't have the number. Oh, thank you, Chief. So this is something that we talk about at every finance committee. So it's the document, even on Thursday, we had a conversation about this this won't help me.
That's the old one.
This is the one where we're expecting 10.6% at the end potentially of FY '24.
Around 5.5.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. So the city's setting on 5.5 million. So I just don't know, you know, I mean, I understand the policy, I get it, but I just don't understand the argument.
The policy for the general fund is 17%. So that is well below the financial policy that has been set and is a best practice recommendation from GFOA.
So, wait, exactly. So if that's practice recommendation, I mean, I think that's part of the argument for parks. They have a fund balance and it's best practice to maintain a fund balance for a rainy day. They're running a business, just like the city. I mean, you know, the city has their unspent money. I mean, what if parks came and tried to dip into that? I just don't see any, I'm surprised the conversation is to a point where we're thinking about taking money from parks. They're the sole entity in town that's probably responsible for any growth we see in the next census, frankly. There's nothing else going on. So I can't believe we would take money from parks.
Director Perry, according to GFOA, is our city reserves at, above, or below their recommended number?
I believe at the time that we passed the 17% in the financial policies for the general fund, that was the recommended best practice.
And are we below that?
We are below that currently. We were below that at the end of FY '22.
If we spend what we need to spend on our insurance down to 10%, will we significantly below that?
Correct.
Is the parks at, below, or above the GFOA recommended fund balance level?
There's actually not a recommended fund balance level for your enterprise funds or for your special revenue
At,
funds.
above, or below 17%?
They are below 17%. However, they are above what is in our city financial policies as their percentage, which would be 10%.
That's all I need to know.
Any other comments, questions, members of the committee? For my part, I'll say I think this is a really close question for me. I mean, obviously, all Councilman Schwartz's proposed spending items are vitally important. I agree 1,000% that we need to find a way to fund those things. And I can't personally speak to the campaigns that were waged on this over, decades ago, over the past decades, any promises that were made, flyers that went out, or anything like that. But all of that aside, what I do see is, right or wrong, regardless of what it was based on, it's been a long-standing practice of how we split these particular funds. And I think it's something that people have come to expect. So I'm not saying that I'm opposed to restructuring the split at some point, even in the relatively near future. But what we're attempting to do here, or what's being proposed here, is sort of attempting to do it on the fly, largely with a few large, important, totally unrelated spending items sort of being the counterbalance and the focus of the discussion. So I'm not necessarily opposed to restructuring the split, but I do think it needs to be done thoughtfully over a little bit of time, and with some preparation. And I mean, also giving parks a little bit of time to figure out how they might reconfigure their own numbers and how it would affect them and if they need to change anything. So while this evening I have to be a no at this point, I'm not opposed to continuing the conversation and maybe revisiting it at some point in the near future. Just want to make that clear. Any other comments or questions, members of the committee?
Does this just go in the parking lot then? Do we wait for the,
Maybe.
yes. what the motion does, put it on the parking lot for now.
I understood your motion to be passing it tonight.
I don't know if we should vote on it without everybody here or not, I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, we can, we don't have to vote on it tonight at all, it's your, that's your call, it's your motion. If you'd rather wait for a future meeting, we can definitely do it.
And then just put it on the parking lot for now. Take the 560 away and add those three things to the parking lot.
Okay, we can do that. I know there are parks personnel here. Would you all like to make some response comments, knowing that we're not actually gonna vote on this tonight at this point?
Sure, brief one, Chairman, thank you. Just for the record, as a Parks Commission and Parks Department, we would never believe that our department is more important than any department in the city. And we certainly don't want to get into a struggle between buying a fire truck on 9/11, which is emotionally driven for all of us. Certainly don't want to get into a tug of war with the department for much needed equipment. So we won't put us in that situation. We respect all of the departments and what they need, what they want, what they require. And just to offer a solution, I don't know if it would be acceptable to the committee or to the council as a whole. We would certainly be prepared to make a presentation to this body or the council as a whole on this related subject, potentially a yard waste subject, potential a fee chargeback, fee-based system or adjustment on the 28th. If that would work.
On the 28th?
That's right. Or whichever.
2.5 weeks?
Frankly, we'll do it whenever you'd like, to be honest, but we wanted to give.
I hope, and maybe this hope is misplaced, I hope we're not still having these meetings, frankly, on the 28th.
Well,
And particularly that we're not having informational presentations that way, that might have other actions that might have to follow them. So if we could get that in the next meeting or two, that'd be.
I didn't want to preempt that at all, what you had on the agenda, so we'll do it whenever you like, to be honest.
Yeah.
Would, Mr. Michael, would Thursday work for you?
Sure.
Yeah, I know that's a few days.
You bet. Absolutely. Appreciate that. You bet too.
Any other comments or questions on this topic? Okay. Any other topics of discussion, members of the committee? Councilman Spencer.
Yes, I'd like to propose that on the parking lot that we place the admin fees from parks that asked for previous budgets. And then I'd kind of like to tie that into with the yard waste compost services.
So to clarify, we are talking about the difference in what the calculation is for all other funds versus what we are currently showing in the parks budget as an expense and the city budget as a revenue, correct?
Correct.
Did you want to explain what you mean by tying it in with the compost?
Yeah, to utilize those dollars to help fund this year's expense for yard compost services.
I believe those services are already in the budget.
But I would offset those to cover the cost for that. Remove those dollars in the budget elsewhere.
So,
Councilman Mealy?
what we're getting to there is to turn that cost over to parks and remove it from the budget. And I just caution this body and Jefferson City on that because the parks maintains their budget. The council does not prescribe to parks how they spend their budget. Correct.
Well, it's a much broader and longer standing conversation when you get into the admin fee chargeback topic. It comes up in some form, and it has come up in some form, I think, pretty much every year for the last several years.
So to get into the business, first off, I am a strong proponent of parks getting out into the business. That's a public works component. But secondly, for parks to set up and present as a all seasons currently, my estimation is that exceeds $1 million. They're set up, they don't have the equipment, they don't have the setup for it. I mean, that's just not something that happens overnight, and it's something that would decimate well over half of their spend fund balance, for example.
Perhaps I'm not understanding the motion. Councilman Spencer, are you proposing to turn that function over to Parks and have Parks become the compost?
No, just using those dollars from the admin fee to cover the yearly cost of the yard waste compost.
And I know this, I mentioned doing things on the fly a little while ago, this would certainly be that. It might help the newer members if we could get some basic information about what the admin chargeback is, what it does, what it covers, and sort of general how it's not necessarily, I mean, if you can do it right now, that's great, but
So I previously provided an email to council, I think it was last Thursday or Friday maybe, where Councilman Spencer had asked information on the admin chargeback. So essentially what the admin chargeback is it's a calculation that disperses the expenses of the administrative departments, which are mayor and council, city clerk, city attorney, human resources, finance, and IT. And it spreads those out based on a percent of total operating expenditures for the last audited fiscal year. And this year that would be FY22. And so we are dispersing a portion of the administrative costs for those departments to all of our enterprise funds, airport, parking, transit, and wastewater, also to parks, the special revenue fund, and also then to workers' comp. We do allocate, it seems kind of unusual that you would allocate a portion of administrative chargebacks to transit and airport because we subsidize them, but we do that in order to give an accurate depiction of the administrative costs that are going into both of those funds. So at this point, those calculations are done, and it's my understanding that I'm starting my 15th year. This has been done as long as I've been here and prior to, that the portion that Parks would pay for the administrative chargebacks was 5% of the sales tax collected for the previous 12 months. What that equates to essentially is that the calculation that's used for all other funds comes to $647,636 for parks, but the cap, the 5% of the collected sales tax for 12 previous months is $344,745. So parks is essentially paying 53.23% of the amount that we calculate and use the calculation for all other funds. That's not the same for parks. Does that get you kind of what you're looking at? And
that all sounds very familiar.
I think what Councilman Spencer is also requesting of us is that we would increase the administrative chargeback for parks to be 100% of what the calculation is, as opposed to the 53%, and then that revenue would the additional revenue, which is $302,000, would offset the cost that would go into the yard waste contract. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. Beautifully said.
Comments, questions from the committee? Seeing none, I think, Mr. Michael, did you mention admin chargebacks in your list of things that you might present on?
I did, I anticipated that.
Councilman Spencer, are you all right holding that till Thursday when they come back with their presentation?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Just like it on the parking lot.
I believe, I see it there. There it is. Any other topics of discussion that members of the committee would like to bring tonight? Councilman Schwartz.
I'm gonna talk about the 253, 200, the four
The four police cars.
and the additional $20,000 for the complete GPS. I'm gonna go ahead and identify a funding source for that would be out of the parking enterprise fund. We have earlier this session, or whatever we call these, we moved to take the enforcement arrest policy away from the parking attendants. And so that duty now once again falls solely with the police department. So I think taking a small piece of a large fund balance to buy some new police cars is a justified and viable use of some of that $5.5 million fund balance.
Was that a request to place that on the parking lot, or is that a motion to fund the items on the parking lot with
I
the?
think we should just wait until we have a full, so yeah, just put it on,
But with that as the identified
that's the identified
revenue source.
revenue source. Thank you.
Care to comment on that proposal before we move on? Seeing none, any other new topics of discussion or proposals? Councilman Spencer.
Yes, sorry. I would like to propose a change to the 75-25. Oh, no,
Sorry.
is there something related to that?
There is something related to what Councilman Schwartz just presented.
Okay,
So can we-
I will.
I guess one of the clarifications that we need is historically when you have conducted these meetings, you would put something on the parking lot and come back to it the next meeting with a funding source and it would be voted on. So in this particular instance, the 4 police cars were put on at the last meeting. Now a funding source is being presented. I
Councilman
guess we
Schwartz,
just need to know how we're going to
call for
proceed.
vote on this tonight, or you can bring the whole package back on Thursday and bring it up again.
I'm fine with it.
And Mr. Chair, that has just been your stipulation in the past. If we're going to waive that, that's fine. I just want to make sure we make a note of that. That that's
And stuff that dies at the end of the meeting doesn't die forever, it just comes back the next
Correct.
meeting. So 6 of 1 and
Is that-
whatnot, but,
So we're happy to just,
okay, Councilman Schwartz has made the motion to, adopt these changes. Was it the 4 police cars and then,
The last piece of the GPS crash reconstruction.
he has identified a funding source. We have a motion, do we have a second? Second. We have a second from Councilman Spencer. Good. Committee discussion, Councilman Neely.
So if I remember right, when Chief, you made your presentation, you presented that one vehicle would be at kind of the bottom level sufficient to get through FY24.
Actually, the presentation was that we can anticipate, and knowing how many miles and hours are put onto those vehicles, we know that we've got 5 that will be approaching the 100,000 mile-ish mark during the next budget cycle. So that's why we asked for 5, because we work very closely with our central maintenance staff and have identified that once a police vehicle that has 100,000 miles has probably got untold number of hours on the engine from sitting idle and running for 2 out of every 3 shifts per day. So you get to the 100,000 mile mark, then your maintenance costs really start to go out the roof. We try to get those replaced at around 100,000 miles. We can anticipate we'll have 5 of those next year.
I'm not absolutely opposed to this, but I think with the situation the city's in, we've got to kind of really scrutinize these things. And then I often too wonder next year if not only our city, but if everybody in America will be in a better position to buy vehicles at a much more reasonable rate. I just remembered you had said that one was kind of bottom line, and then you may see where the others go, but.
The issue right now, and thanks to the council for last year, because due to some of the ARPA, we were able to get 8 police vehicles, but due to the time it takes to get a new vehicle and get them upfitted, a lot of the vehicles that we had to purchase last year are just now getting out to the streets. So we have to anticipate that it takes us roughly a year to place that order and to see that they're being produced in time.
Any other questions, comments, members of the committee? Chief?
Once the committee's completed, I just wanted to mention, I probably feel obligated to say that in terms of using parking funds, just the traditional mindset has always been that money is collected for maintenance and improvements to parking and parking specifically in downtown. So I don't know if Director Marash would want to weigh in on that, as far as this has also been discussed before. And ultimately, to my knowledge, it's not been done before. So I just want to make sure that council has all the information they need from staff on that, and to weigh in on that if it's at the council's pleasure.
If you would like to.
Yeah, and he is correct. Past, it has been utilized or reserved for needs of parking, and when the rates were upped several years back, that was the discussion that there would be future construction of a garage or something, or upkeep of it. But it's not, Brian said it before, it's not illegal to move the funds to different places. It doesn't necessarily have to be reserved for just parking related. It's up to the council to move them around if they so choose. They just haven't done that in the past.
Was that fair? I understand Councilman Schwartz's rationale for this is sort of the new dedicated parking related responsibilities that police has taken on in the last few months. So, Councilman Mealy.
What, I don't have the numbers in front of me. Does anybody right offhand know what that leaves that fund balance at with this proposal?
So in the very last page of your budget document, it would show you the fund balance. And the parking fund balance currently has an unrestricted, this was at the end of FY22, had an unrestricted of $5.2 million. So the amount that you're looking at here, the $253,200, would come out of that number and be moved to general fund as a transfer in.
Councilman Schwartz?
Yeah, and I talked to Lieutenant Weaver the other day, and last year, I think it was last year, and Chief could probably talk about this, but I think there was an attempted murder somewhere over off Boonville, around Boonville during a snowstorm, and not a single detective could get there in their Dodge Durangos because they weren't equipped in the snow. So they literally had to drive their own personal vehicles to what at that point they thought was a murder scene. The individual ended up living, apparently. But I mean, these are the types of things we're dealing with. And we have money sitting there, and we're using just a small fraction, I think less than 5% of the fund balance, to get these guys and girls better equipment. I mean, it just, the rationale is sound, the funding source is sound fiscally, and we've got to upgrade when we can. So we're gonna end up like the state capitol, and it's gonna cost us twice as much than what we could have been doing the whole time.
Any other comments, questions? Councilman Lester?
Yeah, I don't think I have a problem with this. I just was wondering about the fiscal comparability. So Dallas Police is taking over a function that used to be done by parking enterprise. Do we know how much financially that burden is on police annually?
I sure don't. I do not have those numbers.
Talking about over 250,000.
have the numbers now.
Yeah, that was a code on the books that I was frankly unaware of. We didn't really do that. I don't think we were even legally able to do that function. You had to be a sworn police officer, is my understanding. Brian, you looked into this. So anyway, we were cleaning up those ordinances and passed that. So if there was an arrest needed, we would call 911 or call the police direct and get them up there for sure.
Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, can we get a roll call vote, please?
Hollers, Deacon.
Aye.
Hensley.
Aye.
Lester,
Aye.
Mealy.
Aye.
Schwartz. Spencer.
Aye.
Spicer. Wiseman. Wright. Thank you.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you very much. Any other topics, proposals, Councilman Spencer?
Yes, in the fund line, 7525, I'd like to propose $500,000 dedicated for economic development. About 80% of that would go to projects needed at the airport, such as the entrance road, fence, and the parking lot, and stormwater upgrades.
Okay, so this is was it the 1.3 million total you're starting with, and then we've applied 300 change to items last meeting, so this is 500 on top of the 300 plus.
So the motion would be to essentially move it out of the long-term project funding into airport economic development or
Airport maintenance upgrades. I'll leave it to my.
Yeah, Councilman Schwartz had asked us a couple of times, I sent him some emails about it. I'm recalling the number was
366 is what I have, but
probably what it was, I couldn't remember exactly.
but there's a stormwater project, a sewer project, and the fourth ward that we're really taking a hard look at that would probably be used for the balance of that.
Comments or questions, Councilman Mealy?
So for that particular project, it looks like here the wastewater fund balance is 5.6 million. So what again is the funding source for this proposal? Because I'm not following where the $5,000 economic development was coming from.
Well, I think what Councilman Spencer is proposing is in Fund 46 on page 304 of the budget document. There is a long-term project funding. This is where we've got the 25-75 split. It currently sits in the mayor's approved at 956, but we took a little bit of money out of there. I don't remember how much, to be honest with you. When you approved the short-term items last time, like $40,000, $46,000. But this would be to move $500,000 out of that long-term funding and putting it into a specific airport upgrade account, which we would have to create.
I think it was 367,000 last week.
That is on page 303
Yeah.
as short-term,
Right.
what you approved last week. I do believe what he's proposing this week is out of the long-term funding. Am I correct, Councilman Spencer?
Yes, that'd be.
Which is on page 304. So the short-term account included the 25% plus a little bit extra that you approved last week out of the long-term. And the long-term was just sitting there. We talked about it at the last meeting that it was not necessary to identify, but it was surely council's prerogative if they chose to do so. Very first line on page 304.
On the 956.
Yes,
Sorry.
that's where he's proposing that
Sorry
come
about
from.
Mistake.
So
So not related to not touching the remaining balance of the 75-25 then?
Well, this is the 75%, so this is what, I mean, I think he's proposing at this point, touching it and utilizing it.
Sorry. Councilman Mueller.
This is a little off subject, but the airport seems ripe for grant writing. Could anybody tell me when the last grant was received for our airport?
The airport has grant funds every year for part of their operations.
So
I think we just approved one at the last council meeting.
Yeah.
Receiving funds.
Yeah, so that grant is the sole grant?
No, I think that's one of many.
Yeah,
Speak to that.
so yeah, there's obviously a lot of grant opportunities at the airport. Mainly, we call it inside the fence. They have to be spent in a certain order, have to be part of a master plan that's developed on it. There's a whole criteria there. Typically the parking areas and the roadway entrance are not part of that pool that you would get grants for. They're not inside the fence, it's just a public access area, so.
Any other comments or questions? Councilman Lester.
I'll just, point out that this proposal is not part of what was within the reviewed by the directors recommended projects for long-term or parking lot. And sorry, I question there. I also have a question since we are getting a new city administrator and we're having the study done. I don't know about making some of these expenditures that maybe we don't need to do. I also, in the public works projects, we talked about having 11 million, and it could be with inflation, and it could be anywhere from around 12 million to 26 million. I mean, I don't know if we want to dedicate more money right now from existing. We're better off maybe leaving it there and having greater discussions about the best use of those funds.
Councilman Schwartz.
Yeah, I sit on the airport advisory committee, and we had a meeting this morning. So in 2023, it's going to be the first year that we have over 40,000 touchdown landings at the Jeff City Airport, of which the percentage of jet traffic is up to almost 9%, which is outstanding news for us. I think Director Smith said in testimony earlier this year that the airport was the face of our city, and I agree with that. Unfortunately, the face doesn't look so hot right now. There's a 3-day air show this coming weekend that's going to draw thousands of people too. And I think that's the textbook definition of economic development. So I think if it's going to be the face of our city, if the corporate travel continues to modify into air flight, especially private, that we need it to be looking the best we can. And so I think it's a wise use of money that is not yet allocated and long overdue.
Any other comments or questions by members of the committee? Yeah, I'll say, I think the use would be a great one. I think it's definitely needed over there. My concern at this point is that we are trying to do something different this year and try to spread these funds out over, I think, 4+ years. I'm doing the 75-25, correctly, 4+ years. So to spend more than half the money in the first year, I think doesn't get us off to the most regimented start with that effort, but that's my only concern. I don't have a problem at all with the particular use. I just didn't think that's what we were trying to do with these funds in the first year. Any other comments or questions? We get a roll call, please. Sorry, we had
Was
a
that a
motion
motion
and
or a
a motion and a
parking
second, or were you just put on the parking lot? My mistake, okay, sorry about that. Any other items proposed this evening? Topics of discussion? I will remind everyone that our next meetings are September 14th, which is this Thursday, and September 21st, Thursday next week, 5:30 p.m.
Mr. Chairman,
Yep.
did you want to address the parks parking lot for the additional $2 million of capital improvements, or do you want to let that one
I think we'll
ride?
let that one ride. Anyone here to make public comment this evening? Seeing none, thank you. Any final comments from members of the committee? Any final comments from staff?
I will redo the parking lot and send that out again tomorrow, just so everyone could take a look at it and make sure that it seems logical what we've got on there with what your requests were.
Okay, and I'll just remind everyone, I know, we cover a lot of different topics in these meetings, but truly any one of these meetings now from here on out could be the final meeting of the budget preparation season. So if there's something that you feel is a high priority of yours that you want to get in, I just urge everyone to bring their best and final in terms of using resources to a meeting, because it might be the last one of this year. So with nothing else to be said, I'll call us adjourned and see everyone on Thursday. Thank you.